We're going to continue now the study of the oral law in terms of, did God give a binding, authoritative oral law to Moses, which has been passed on through the generations? Is this given by God? Is this something foundational? In fact, I just jotted down a couple of notes there during the break. If someone could just hand it to me right in the front there. Yeah, Jeff, why don't you just bring this up here? Actually, this is Jeff Cohen. He requested that he get on the camera, so this is my way of getting him on here. Okay. I have no argument, I have no question that there were traditions that developed in Israel. I have no argument, no question that different laws and customs were added over periods of time. The question is, was there a binding oral law that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai that was then passed on through the generations, and that is continuing in its force in the place of rabbinic traditional Judaism today? And the answer to that is categorically no. We want to give further examples of why we are so clear and definite on that. And then we'll give some further arguments for the oral law and see why they fall short. To illustrate this, the question is raised, okay, Deuteronomy 6 and some other passages which talk about that we should make these words as a frontlet between our eyes. What does that actually mean? What's the meaning of some of the words and phrases involved? How is it lived out? And the answer from traditional Judaism, of course, is it's referring to the phylacteries, tefillin, so that you wear these two boxes in your, ultimately the way it's done is in morning prayer, except on the Sabbath and special holy days. Some of the Talmudic rabbis would wear these over the course of the day. So the one box on the forehead, the other on the arm near the heart, and each containing scripture passages. And one of the great arguments in favor of this is, look, in the discoveries in the Dead Sea Scrolls, some of the archaeological discoveries, they actually found these very same things, these phylacteries with the same black leather, even though these people were not Pharisees in their orientation, part of the Pharisaical party, yet they had the identical interpretation. There must have been an oral tradition, an oral explanation going back to Moses. There are a few fundamental problems with that. One is that the rabbis were very clear about 4 boxes within the tefillin, 4 scripture passages, certain scripture passages read, etc. Well, some of the phylacteries found at Qumran had 5 compartments instead of 4. This was a no-no. In fact, the later rabbis were quite strong against this, yet the one group that did have something similar had it significantly different. Not only so, the Samaritans did not take the commandment literally, and the way the Septuagint translated it, it indicated it was not taken literally, but rather metaphorically, as in Proverbs 3, where you're supposed to put the wisdom and commands of God, around your neck and so on. So you use that example. It's the worst example to use because the alleged uniformity ends up being diversity. There was not ancient complete harmony on this, and even among those that had these similar prayer boxes, they were divided up differently. And then others didn't even take it as a literal commandment. Still, we are told, look, the Torah explicitly gives the authority to the rabbis for every area of life based on Deuteronomy 17, 8 through 13. Deuteronomy 17, 8 through 13, as I lay out in volume 5, the rabbis have the sole authority to interpret the law and to tell us how to live. Whoever refuses to listen to them is guilty of a serious sin in the sight of God. You have certain legal disputes. What do? You have certain issues in interpretation of the law. How do I live? How do I follow it? What do I do? You go to the rabbis. The rabbis tell you what to do, and you don't depart from it. Let's read these words. This sounds very serious. Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 8 through 13. Remember the principle. Look it up. Read the verses. If cases come before your courts that are too difficult for you to judge, whether bloodshed, lawsuits, or assaults, take them to the place the Lord your God will choose. Go to the priests or Levites and to the judge who is in office at that time. Inquire of them, and they will give you the verdict. You must act according to the decisions they gave you at the place the Lord will choose. Be careful to do everything they direct you to do. Act according to the law they teach you and the decisions they give you. Do not turn aside from what they tell you to the right or to the left. The man who shows contempt for the judge or for the priest who stands ministering before there to the Lord your God must be put to death. You must purge the evil from Israel. All the people will hear and be afraid and will not be contemptuous again. You say, well, that just sounds kind of like a Supreme Court in Israel, a court of highest appeal that they would set up. If you had certain legal disputes, bloodshed, lawsuits, assault, you take it to the Supreme Court or to the ruling judge, and you have to abide by their decision. Don't depart to the left or to the right. Strikingly, this is now interpreted in Rabbinic Judaism to mean that the rabbis have authority over every area of human life based on Torah law. And this verse that says, do not turn aside from what they tell you to the right or to the left, is interpreted to mean even if they tell you right is left, do what they say. Amazingly. And the Hebrew is literally, whether between blood and blood, the first word, which is rightly translated bloodshed. In other words, capital crimes, homicides, issues like that. If you're having difficulty sorting this through, case is too difficult, too baffling, you bring it to the Supreme Court in Israel or to the presiding judge, leader. According to Rashi and other rabbinic interpretation, between blood and blood is rulings on menstrual issues. So this is the first thing that the Supreme Court in ancient Israel is dealing with. It just shows you how much a rabbinic interpretation is being retrojected onto this text. Simply saying that there are going to be law courts established in the land with difficult cases and do what they say, just like we have to submit to the rulings of the Supreme Court. What, however, if the court said, deny God, throw out the Torah? Do you still listen to what they say, or in that case, do you do what God says because they're in violation? Of course, you do what God says because they're in violation. And yet Rabbinic Judaism would tell us that the spirit that was on the prophets, with prophecy having ceased, that spirit is now on the sages and the wise men. And because they have the insight, the wisdom, the understanding, that you do what they say, even if they tell you right is left and left is right, you do it. So in response to this use of Deuteronomy 17, I explained this is a gross misinterpretation of Deuteronomy 17, 8 through 13, a text which does not mention the rabbis at all and speaks only of the function of a court of referral for certain difficult cases. It does not give later rabbinic teachers the authority to tell the Jewish people how they should live out every detail of their lives, both private and public, down to the minutest detail. I mean, the Talmud gives tradition as to which hands you wipe within the bathroom. In fact, nowhere in the Bible is any such authority given to human beings, an authority that far transcends both the Torah and the words of God's inspired prophets. Even more seriously, the Talmud teaches that any Jew who denies that both the written and oral Torahs come from Moses has no share in the world to come. Meaning that if a Jewish person denies the validity of these rabbinic traditions, they are excluded from the world to come. Nowhere in the Scriptures is such a thing intimated. Where did God ever tell us that human beings were going to tell us exactly how to pray every day? What words to say? What time of the day we were to say them? Where does God ever intimate such a thing? Let alone all the other details of life that are governed by Rabbinic Judaism. If you say, hey, but I find those very insightful traditions and very beautiful traditions, and I like the prayers. If it's a matter of you want to